What is the Diablo 4 endgame actually? Is it Nightmare Dungeon farming, or maybe Uber Lilith, or maybe it's Path of Exile? I'm just kidding, Diablo 4 wishes that was the case. But really, the endgame is everything unlocked at level 50, and I'll tell you why, and to top it off, I'll even elaborate on why it's better than Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, yet still fails in the end. First of all, what is endgame? Essentially, it's when you are doing the last piece of content left to progress towards completing the game. There is no actual end to an ARPG, let alone Diablo, but there is a soft endgame of sorts. Once you get 100 and kill Uber Lilith, there's literally nothing else to progress towards except getting perfect rolls on perfect gear. But usually that has an implicit goal of making you strong towards clearing content of any kind. Once that content has been cleared, chasing perfect gear becomes redundant. With that logic, the endgame for Diablo 4 starts with World Tier 4, since World Tier 4 has gated gear in the form of Ancestrals, which you need for Uber Lilith and Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons. But the capstone for World Tier 4 can in theory be done at level 50, and if not, you grind power to do it and unlock it, and sometimes that power, aka the sacred gear, can carry you to level 100, mostly in the form of aspects, so farming World Tier 3 isn't a waste of time per se, it's just not efficient endgame farming. A similar comparison can be made to Diablo 2, which Diablo 4's leveling system is trying to mimic. The goal in Diablo 2 isn't to reach level 99, which is the max, and a lot of times people clear all the Ubers, get the best gear, and complete their builds well before level 90. Although it's not excluded to keep farming the experience points. So we can conclude that max level isn't necessarily the end game, since it can also vaguely be the end goal. If I can kill Uber Lilith before 100, I can't, but I did quite well for level 91, I won't have a reason to keep playing, right? Same with a 100 Nightmare Dungeon. So once again, the conclusion is that level 100 isn't the end game. And it isn't also an arbitrary level number people choose because the sky is blue and the forests are far, when it matches their own narrative or character progression. And this is point A of why endgame starts at level 50. Point B comes in the form of character progression. In terms of RPGs that tend towards the MMO side of the action RPG side, the leveling up process usually stops when you unlock your last skill for your character, and the last kill point you get is at level 50, past that being Paragon points. To cross-reference this with Diablo 3, you would only get Paragon points from your Paragon levels once you reach level 70, which was max, and accessed rifts, bounties, and greater rifts, aka endgame. Everything you have access to as a level 50 plus Diablo character is essentially the same thing you have access to and end up doing at level 100 as a Diablo 4 character. So that is endgame. The levels 51 to 100 are essentially the Paragon levels from Diablo 3. It's just not thousands of Paragon levels, and they are shaped in the form of 50 character levels. Leveling from 50 to 100 doesn't unlock more class depth. It just gives you more stats from Paragon nodes, being additive in the form of main stats like strength and dexterity, or multiplicative stats in the form of damage to vulnerable, to elite, and so on. You can make a weak argument on legendary nodes that add class effects, and I would counter that with the fact that they are optional. Skill points are not optional. Legendary nodes in the Paragon boards are. As a barbarian playing Whirlwind, one of the 2 top builds in the game currently, I literally take 0 legendary nodes simply because the rare nodes provide more power. So the matter is about raw power, not class mechanics that you get from legendary nodes, hence optional. So now that we have defined what the Diablo 4 endgame is through infallible logic, let's talk about why it's better than Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, yet still fails as game design. Firstly, Diablo 2 has no real endgame content to speak of outside of uber bosses and season gimmicks, which have only been introduced in D2 Resurrected to my knowledge. That being Season 3's Terror Zones, which is a spin on Helltides, or maybe Helltides are a spin on Terror Zones. Either way, the only thing you can do as content in Diablo 2 is just re-clear zones and bosses you cleared during the campaign. That's it. While obviously D4 adds Helltides, Nightmare Dungeons, Capstone Dungeons, Fields of Hatred PvP, and I guess that's it. Season of the Malignant is actually less game content than freaking terror zones. What? How does Diablo 4 fail here then? Well, in the grand scheme of farming replayable content, D2 has less content, but it's actually more replayable. Because every single time, every part of the zone is generated randomly with the exception of boss rooms, and you don't do the same stuff as often as you do in D4. And also, you get to do more endgame stuff than just pure dungeons, through bosses, zones, whole acts, and stuff like that. Second of all, campaign bosses being farmed are arguably more interesting to engage with. They are more iconic than the regular bosses you find in the cave or underground passage or whatever. And Diablo 4 skipped on that part and gated the campaign bosses to only be done once during the campaign, despite the fact that Diablo 4 campaign bosses are way more interesting than Diablo 2 bosses, with the appropriate caveat to be made that more than 20 years separate these two games. Then how does a 2023 game fail so spectacularly against a game that has simpler, more bland content and is 2 decades old? How do you fail to not pick up on the good things from Diablo 2 and make them better, considering Diablo 2 and its predecessor, Diablo 1, essentially created the whole f***ing genre of ARPG and are your games? Similarly, Diablo 4 improves upon the Paragon-style endgame that Diablo 3 had. Still has. Farming hundreds and thousands of Paragon levels in Diablo 3 for stat increases is incredibly stupid and boring for a modern game. It worked for Diablo 3 in the last 10 years, but from a supposed upgrade to it, you want more, and Diablo 4 does upgrade on it. Paragon boards are actually good, albeit with a bit more work. Make blue glyphs matter or take them out of the game. They just fill my list for no reason. There's literally zero, once again, zero reason and opportunity to ever use one of these. Buff them or delete them. Second, balance the legendary nodes, of course. I know other classes than Barbarian like them, but that's no reason for Barb to not have cool shit that matters. As far as world content goes, the open world, side quests, events, world bosses, hell tides, and fields of hatred are a massive upgrade to Diablo 3's bounties, once again. Although not necessarily pure endgame content, these are things you end up doing during endgame in both games, to some extent. And once again, this is where the improvements stop. Nightmare Dungeons are a downgrade to Greater Rifts. Part of the cool reason to do Greater Rifts is to push the level to as high as possible. Hopefully higher than last season, or hopefully higher than other people playing your class. Kind of hard to do when 1. There are no leaderboards because that's why, and 2. Nightmare Dungeons are capped at 100, coming back to my initial point of why there's no reason to keep playing after getting a level 100 Nightmare Dungeon under your belt. And if you unite these 2 points, there is no reason to ever do more than 1 Nightmare Dungeon, period. Maybe one of each affix to fully taste the pie that is Lightning Storm, Drifting Shade, or Stormbane's Wrath. Yeah, you enjoy that content, gamer. Enjoy going into a Nightmare Dungeon because you like killing stuff and being forced to stop killing stuff, stop playing your class because we need a challenge, lol. A challenge isn't me stopping my run to stay in the bubble so I don't die. There's no counterplay to it when I get one shot. Same thing with the other affixes and same thing with chain crowd control. It didn't work for World of Warcraft's Mythic Plus affixes, it won't work here. And do you know what happened to these dungeon affixes that just make shit annoying for the sake of it slowing you down? They got removed in WoW. And the only reason to do only 1 Nightmare Dungeon is because a level 100 Nightmare Dungeon is the same as a level 2 Nightmare Dungeon. You just have more stuff in it. And that's it. All of these issues are similar to World of Warcraft and yet we're still going through them in Diablo 4. Man, if only there were some Diablo devs that, could be aware of this issue from this other game made by the same company they work for. That's right there. That's really big. That's like the biggest MMO on the market, while they are also trying to design a pseudo MMO of their own. If only Diablo devs could do some research of any kind in the area of expertise and activities that they operate in. Why though, when they can just make a new transmog set for real money in the game shop and get paid that way? Obviously that's a little bit reductive, but it's true. It takes an insurmountable amount of incompetence, ignorance, and pride to develop Diablo 4 endgame in the state that it is, considering the amount of good experience you can gain by studying what was used to build the ARPG genre to the point where you can design Diablo 4, let alone actually playing your own game. Not even saying playing Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 at this point. I guess that's what you get when you hire inexperienced game designers with an agenda to make a game they want, despite what the game should be. And this isn't a point of what we as players want the game to be. This is just what the game should be. You cannot appeal to a player base built in over 25 years that expect from your title and franchise to deliver an ARPG that's an improvement over its past titles and just not deliver that, while stating publicly in interviews that you are learning and the game is evolving.
I mean, I think it's just like we're all kind of just working our way through it. It's like sure, we have a lot of benefits of being part of Blizzard, and we had a lot of learnings, and we were able to talk to each other and understand what's going on in WoW and what's going on in Overwatch, and we can talk to each other. But at the end of the day, this team is like doing a live service like this is new for this team, and even we have some D3 veterans and things, but a lot of our team there's a good part of our team where Diablo 4, we were at the launch party where I was like, how many people this is your first game ever? And like a bunch of hands go up and you're like, how many people this is your first game ever?
First game ever.
What are you learning exactly that you couldn't learn by simply playing any of the past Diablo games from the last 3 decades? Why is the game evolving through the same issues that the other at least 2 games solved years ago? And this is not even to talk about other ARPGs like Path of Exile. That's a whole other level of inexplicably outrage that can pour out while trying not to think how shamelessly they took my money. And all of this just feels so bad when you think how good some of the good parts of Diablo 4 are. The parts that are good are really good, man. And I bet the game will become one of the best RPGs ever once it gets out of its player-proclaimed beta phase. It's still fun and I enjoy playing the shit out of it, but I do have to actively ignore its issues sometimes, so I can actually appreciate the fun that it can still deliver. Man, it sucks we have to make videos like this, dude. Negative shit is just boring. We freaking named our channel Diablo forever, for Christ's sake. I guess that's the lesson we need to learn. Diablo is a cool franchise, and there is an emotional attachment to it that we have. It's easy to get lost in the sauce sometimes and forget some of the good parts, because if it didn't have any good parts, it would have died in the beta. Because the way I am wrong about certain things, you definitely are wrong about as well. And in this video, we will tell you why.